The Last Neanderthals. How one small population nearly saved a species. For nearly 400,000 years, Neanderthals called Europe home. They survived advancing glaciers, changing climates, and countless generations of environmental upheaval. They were skilled hunters, adapted to cold environments, and spread across much of Europe and Western Asia. Then, about 75,000 years ago, their world changed. Not gradually, suddenly. For years, scientists assumed Neanderthals remained scattered across Europe until a fire destroys almost all of them. The library still exists, but nearly every unique story has been lost. A genetic bottleneck works much the same way. A population survives. Discovered in France, Belgium, Germany, and Serbia, the researchers compared those results with 49 previously published DNA samples and combined them with archaeological evidence from sites across Europe. What emerged was an unexpected pattern. Around 75,000 years ago, Europe experienced one of the coldest periods of the last ice age. Archaeological sites become fewer. Neanderthal populations appear to shrink dramatically. Instead of surviving across the continent, the evidence suggests they retreated into a climatic refuge in what is now southwestern France. Why there? Unlike much of northern Europe, southwestern France benefited from the moderating influence of the Atlantic Ocean. Even as glaciers expanded elsewhere, this region retained forests, rivers, and the large game animals Neanderthals depended upon. It may have become one of the last places where a small population could survive. For perhaps 10,000 years, these survivors endured while much of their former range remained uninhabitable. Then something remarkable happened. Around 65,000 years ago, the descendants of this refuge population began expanding once again. They spread across Europe, from the Iberian Peninsula to the Caucasus, and the genetic evidence tells an astonishing story. Nearly every late Neanderthal studied so far belongs to the same maternal mitochondrial lineage. In other words, the last Neanderthals across Europe may have descended from one remarkably small surviving population. It was, in effect, a second beginning for the species, but recovery did not guarantee survival. The researchers found evidence for another severe population decline between about 45,000 and 42,000 years ago. By then, Neanderthals had become genetically very similar to one another. Small, isolated groups with limited genetic diversity are often less resilient. They have fewer genetic variations to help them adapt to changing environments, emerging diseases, or new competitors. The study does not claim that low genetic diversity caused Neanderthal extinction. Science is rarely that simple. Instead, it's able to withstand the many challenges they faced, including rapidly changing climates and the arrival of expanding populations of modern humans. By approximately 40,000 years ago, the last Neanderthals had disappeared. Yet this discovery changes the way we think about their story. Rather than a slow decline across hundreds of thousands of years, Neanderthal history may have included a dramatic rescue. A tiny population, isolated in one corner of Europe, survived a catastrophe that nearly erased an entire species. For 20,000 years, their descendants reclaimed a continent. Every late Neanderthal whose DNA we have studied may carry the genetic signature of that remarkable survival. Sometimes history does not turn on great armies or sweeping migrations. Sometimes the future of an entire species depends on a handful of survivors finding one place where life can continue. And 40,000 years later, their DNA is still telling us their story.